Second game from Tarrasch's book, 500 Master Games. Features Tarrasch as white, playing Alekhine or Alekhine as black. Baden-Baden, 1925. Let's see what we get here. E4, E5, like always. Knight F3, Knight C6. White attacks the pawn, black just defends it. And we go with the Italian. Alright. Last time, I think we also got bishop c5 and c3 moves. But here, the previous game we looked at was the old line queen e7. Of course, this is the most played way to go here. But here we get a different move order, but very similar to the first game. Bishop b6, just sidestepping the threat. So we don't have to, the pawn on d4 doesn't attack the bishop, so we have time to deal with it. And that's what happens. White takes a central push, tries to build a big center. And we get the queen e7 again, defending the e5, trying to maintain some kind of a hold on the center. Of course, always ideal is to have defend pawns with pawns, so you'd have also a pawn presence in the center. But here, of course, d6 would always lead to some kind of a problems with takes. And now you take with the knight, you drop the pawn. Take with the king, you drop the pawn. So those seem not so good. Have to do it some other way. Black does queen e7. Of course, you could take it, but then you've given up the white the central duo, and you don't have the d5, which is often the right way to meet this, because it's covered twice, and we have no knight f6 played, for instance, which would support the d5 push, opening our bishop and strike in the center. So queen e7, and here, of course, white castles. Taking is possible, but doesn't really promise white anything. Push, on the other hand, does block the bishop in. So he just castles. King to the safety, the rook's coming to e1. And in the last game, got d6, supports the center. Here we get a more aggressive knight f6, hitting the central pawn. Of course, it's a little dangerous to take perhaps some days, because you have the queen and the king lined up there, but maybe it's definitely a threat here, because there is the pawns in the way. In the game, white just played rook e1 to defend the central pawn. I mean, it's a very typical move in the Italian game. So frees the f1 square often for the knight to maneuver towards the g3 or e3 squares. Some other ways would have been, of course, well, takes would probably simplify the game. Don't have f5s. f4, sorry, because of the pins. Also, the pawn is probably not hanging, since there is always the pins on the e file. Another way would have probably been to go and pin the knight, and then you have to decide as black what you really want to go for. Chasing the bishop around with h6, g5, but weakening the king side quite a lot there. Or maybe just defend the pawn center. But we got rook e1, just defend. And black defends his central pawn with the pawn. a4, With perhaps some traits like the previous game where we threaten to push a5 and then there is this queen a4 checks slash forks to pick up the piece. I mean, if you do, for instance, the took first with the bishop, it would take, knight takes the fork here. Knight comes back, there is the d5 and pick up the piece. Or 2 pieces for a rook. So black just played a6, makes room for the bishop to drop back. Very typical move. Here Tartagover criticizes the h3, but I don't think that's warranted at all. Seems pretty reasonable move. Why would you want to avoid or allow any kind of a pins here that when your central pawn is so much under so much pressure here already to get the one defender pinned, probably forcing you to take or push the pawn and then again blocking in the bishop. But this Tartagover calls this a very anxious move, but I have to disagree heavily. Black castles, normal, and now white goes and pins black's knight. Now Alekhine plays h6, challenging the bishop to make his mark. Either retreat and possibly face g5, or go back or take. Tarrasch chooses bishop e3. Is this good that we induced h6 here? Is it some kind of weakness? Perhaps. It could be someday. But it's also a loft here. So maybe the bishop could have gone straight up to e3 from the start. But probably doesn't make much of a difference. Queen d8. Here you could have asked, well, isn't that a free pawn? But then there's a nice little trap hidden in this, because there is the d5 hitting the knight and the bishop. And now it doesn't really make a difference. If you move the knight, we'll take the bishop and then hit the knight here, winning a piece. Or if you take here, we can take with the rook, hitting the knight and the knight, both attacked at the moment. I mean, maybe you could do some kind of a counter attack, but the problem is that this does defend it at all. And f5. Really, you have this kind of a resource getting out of trouble. d6. Bang. But yeah, that's a quite a nice little tactic there. Otherwise, you might have had troubles maintaining the defense of the bishop here. Anyways, knight takes e4 did not happen. Alekhine played queen d8. So we went here to defend it, but now it's defended enough. And we preemptively free this square for the knight maneuver, because the knight always is a little bit awkward in these positions, where there's the c3 pawn, making its scope quite limited, so it often likes to maneuver to g6 maybe someday, thinking about reaching f4 or supporting f4 for the other rook. Oh, the other knight, sorry, not the rook. So it drops back here. Of course, it's still a little early, because there is pressure here, though the knight needs to be there, defending it. Alright, this move just defends here. But on the other hand, you did just, the bishop gets a little less aggressive. Leaves a very good looking diagonal here. But then a pawn had to be defended though. And black reintroduces some future tactics there after takes. And white again defends it again. Now there's already 2. Another maneuvering move. Like in the last game, remember that the bishop got eventually taken, and then there's the doubled pawn on b file there. Doesn't really matter much, but here Alekhine just sidestep the d5 stuff, hitting the knight and the bishop at the same time. Or actually maybe it takes. There's more likely outcome, more forceful. White overprotects the e4, connects the rooks, gets off the d file. Is that relevant? We'll see. Probably not. And then black just takes on d4. And here, this is probably a great moment to do it, while white probably doesn't want to take back with the c pawn to maintain his big center, because then there is the knight b4 and white would lose the light squared bishop. And it's pretty openish looking position where the bishop pair could be a major factor. White captures with a knight. And Alekhine plays knight e5, hitting the bishop again, which white definitely doesn't want to part with. So Tarrasch drops the bishop to f1, out of sight. And Alekhine plays d5, strikes at the center. The rook comes here, lines up with the queen. Here you could, for instance, white could have tried, for instance, some kind of a pawn push in the center, f4, e5, but then you after knight h5, he'd have a really hard time maintaining the pawns. Can't really play g3 because there's no defense here. And who's gonna defend this? If you push the pawn, then you drop this guy here. So there's some holes here we could try jumping into. And don't forget that f4, of course, would weaken this diagonal, and maybe someday the bishop could do something relevant. White lines up with the queen, and black plays c5. Kicks the knight out of the center square. White drops back to b3, and black gets out of the d file, or defends this pawn here. It was attacked twice. And white goes and pins the knight. But you have to note that this bishop is undefended. So there is this little tactic to pick up the bishop pair. Check. White takes, black takes. Probably thinking that he's going to net himself a pawn, which he does. Alekhine has seen further. Bishop f5, hitting the queen. And after bishop d3, also you have to see that this pawn is also hanging there all the time to be taken. White tries to block with the bishop. Alekhine takes the h pawn instead. Another little tactic to take here. We take the knight, and that's what happened in the game. Bang, bang. And here white should have played just bishop back here, trying to cover. And he loses the pawn, but this would be a lot better than what happened in the game. He did the same, but he took there first and then dropped the bishop back, counting on the fact that the rook defends the pawn, which is kind of a fast pawn, which makes sense. But unfortunately, there was nothing to be done about Alekhine's rook lift. Rook e5. Bang, bang, bang. Which, if you notice here, there's no rooks to be lifted anywhere in this line. White tried to cover with c4 in the game. Let's see what would happen if, for instance, he tried to do some kind of a rook lift himself, try to get some kind of a cover on g3. Check, king h2. Queen gives a check, and rook comes here, block. There would be just knight e4, the rook's pinned, we had pressure there. Here, for instance, queen, bishop g2, we take with the rook instead. F takes, queen takes, king g1, and now we get the, well, here you have this blockade, so instead of that discovery check, we just check here. If king goes to f1, this is going to be a nice mate. Say king goes to h2, we're gonna now get checked from this angle. King h1, check, and mate. Or if you went king h1 straight up, then queen e1, and then give a check on b8. You can block, and then we take mate. Nothing to throw in between anymore. So here, white tried this, but that was not really the angle we were coming from anyways. Rook g5, king h2. There is the check here now. But then we have this pawn push covering that, because the rook still is here and not here. But Alekhine has a nice finish, knight g4, check. Of course, if you move the king, that's the only legal move, and then you're gonna end up in some kind of a nasty discovery. Well, let's just show it. Check. Either you block with the bishop and get mated here, or you get mated in the corner, for instance. So the knight has to be taken, but then rook takes with a huge threat. Well, white tried to cover it, but the threat is still there. There's no queens to defend there. It's just gonna be a mate. We have one spy check here. That's it. Here, Tarrasch resigned. Quite a nice game. Some very cool moves. Tactics in the end, of course, are flashy, but for me personally, moves like the queen d8 are the star moves. Like well, didn't really get to utilize it in the game, but just a preemptive. Trying to free a square here, or the bishop a7, just to quiet move to get out of any nonsense. Anyways, until next time.